So our next question is about potential pitfalls. We've covered some great benefits. We're bought into this idea that automation can save time, can help us do more with less. But what are potentially some drawbacks or things that you should be watching out for?
So, from our end, one thing that a lesson that we've learned over the years in building AI-powered edtech products is agency, and I saw that pop up a few times in the chat as well. Um, a lot of times, I think edtech has, in the past, I think we're learning as an industry, but in the past, it's been this belief that technology must be better. Technology must be better. So once we bring it in, this will make your life better. And those early days as an industry, I think we sort of forgot that, ultimately it's the human experience. That education is a social enterprise, not a technology enterprise. It's not a spreadsheet. It's not homework. It's moments of interaction and moments of clarity between two human beings, and that is fundamentally built on trust and agency. And so I think as we enter a world where AI is going to exponentially increase its presence and impact on our society and on our lives, I think it's really important to look at tools that are intended to automate and ask, is the human in charge, or are they usurping agency from the human? And if it's the latter, we really need to be thinking carefully about what role they play in our classrooms and in our schools.
Eric, I think for that, I can go back to 2008. That was really the first time we were experimenting with holistic computer labs, and kind of our first dip into that was credit recovery. If you all remember, the huge use of technology in a classroom really started with credit recovery because kids had already sat through a class for a certain period of time and they weren't successful. But, we didn't want them to go back into the same class with the same teacher and have to sit through the class again, because a lot of times they're not successful a second time. So we started seeing some programs come out that would allow the students to, really be tested as they came in, kind of identify their deficiencies and then work their way through it. And already having that seat time, if you will. And so that was kind of the beginning point for the use of technology in the classroom. And then we started wondering, okay, this is working really good with kids who've been through the curriculum one time with a teacher. Can we use it for credit advancement? By that time, Florida Virtual School was already going and doing a good job with what they do. And, the answer was yes. But back to your point, Eric, the teacher is always at the center of that instruction. And when you rely on a computer or a program to teach a kid with no interaction with a teacher, you can see it's not very successful at all. And there are probably kids that could learn that way and be okay, but I can't imagine wanting to go through a class situation without having that interaction with a good teacher. And so you're right, coming back and identifying that and making sure, nothing that we're saying today is threatening the role of a teacher in the classroom. It's actually trying to help it, so these teachers will want to stay in this field a long time. And what automation can we use to help them be a better teacher? Even if they're top of a level 5 teacher in Tennessee is the best, the best teacher, the best evaluation you can get. But a lot of those teachers that now are experimenting with automation, if you will, or technology in their classroom have found out they could be much better teachers, even though they're very good to begin with.
Yeah, I think great auto. Oh, I'm sorry, Randy.
No, go right ahead. Automation.
I was just going to finish that thought with you, Sam, real quick. That I think great automation actually leads to more interaction, right? And so it's not the opposite. Automation isn't meant to replace that interaction.
Yeah, and I think that's the role of the teacher should, through that process, actually go back to what we all got into teaching for in the first place, which was to sit down with kids, find like what they're interested in, what they want to do. Now, how can I help you get there? This machine is going to give you all those foundational pieces. They're going to tell me what your where your discrepancies might be, and then we'll figure out a plan to make that work. That's what most teachers get into. into teaching 4, and then what they end up doing is grading papers, spending time building worksheets, da, 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 da. So how do we get rid of like those mundane things, give that to a machine, and then let the teacher actually teach and pull them in a direction? I think same like what you were talking about, Mr. Brooks, Sam, was that we did the same. We still do the same thing with credit recovery with our tool. We set the kids in, and then we have an automated summer school where you can sit down and go through these online classes, and the kids are still not being any more successful than when they sat through the class with the teacher, because there's really no connection to like, why am I learning this? What's the purpose? What's the reason? To make it through. So we can see that the teacher's role is still very, very valid in that process. If the teacher does not connect with that student, they become lost in this whirlwind of walking through school, and they're not sure like why they're doing this. And so the teacher's role becomes very important in that process. And I believe that the role will be back to like what what am I trying to say? What the real reason is that we got into teaching for.
I think
I
there's
think
another. Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
I was going to say
No, please.
another pitfall was like data overload. You can also, now that we've got all this data coming in, teachers now all of a sudden have all this information and they're not going to know what to do with it. So how do we as leadership, how do we as designers, how do we start to narrow that down so a teacher can take that information, assimilate it, and then even hand it back to the student? I think the same thing with students. Like we want to empower the students. So once the students start to pick up data and they start to see it, how do they start to translate that to make it something that's operational, that they can actually start to move and pick a path, and then ask the people that they need help with. So they can say, hey, I'm struggling in this area. I see it's a discrepancy in my learning. Can you help me? Like, what's my next step to make this happen? That would be very, very powerful. And then imagine a student who graduates from high school who has those skills. They're going to be able to do almost anything.
I think that to that point, Randy, when you talk about especially students accessing this data, it makes me think about a less talked about aspect of technology and automation in tech, which is equity and access. So a lot of these tools, they're digitally based. Many of them require high-speed internet or a data plan on a smartphone. And while that is fairly ubiquitous these days, uh, ensuring that these tools aren't simply a sort of rich get richer, schools that can afford these kind of tools accelerating forward, while districts that may not have budgets as free as some other districts aren't able to move as quickly. I think that's really important. I also think as automation and AI starts to push more into our lives, recognizing like this sentence here of automation, but automation to whose standards, automation by whose sort of conditions, right? And recognizing that a lot of these, or some of these systems, the potential for bias, the potential for edge cases where some folks get left behind and others are move forward or accelerated, that does exist. That imperfection doesn't mean we shouldn't use them, but I think we need to go into this future world of increased automation with our eyes open, and really focusing on making sure that every single student gets as much of the opportunities in our more automated, more AI driven world in the future.
Yeah, I think, Eric, data becomes even more important there, right? So in order to evaluate and hold ourselves accountable to equity and access, making sure that all kids have access to devices, et cetera, you actually need to be measuring and tracking who has that access and who doesn't. Because otherwise it remains sort of a theoretical, or maybe it's happening, but you don't know what to do about it, or you can't actually take an action step because you're like, well, I'm sure some kids don't have a device that works, but I don't know which ones. And so that's where the data becomes more and more important. Sort of access notwithstanding, Randy, when you talk about getting teachers back to that, I don't know, sort of idealistic utopian version of teaching.
Come on, we can do it. We can do it.
Yes, I love it. I do think I'll put a plug in here for learning management systems. I know that there was a big ramp up during the pandemic, but I actually think that a learning management system is like a perfect example of automation that's already happening in classrooms around the world, where, before there was this passing back of papers and tracking of assignments and writing down things in a paper grade book, if you will, and now those things are digitized. And so there is some fluidity, and I think a lot gained through learning management systems. There are things maybe that we've lost too, which we can think about how do you replace that.
Ooh, can I jump on
Those,
that one?
yeah, go for it.
So it's the one that actually kind of, I must have been 7 years ago when Google Docs popped up and teachers saw that, you can see the kids typing at the same time. This is awesome. This is magnificent. Now all of a sudden you have a learning management system where you toss the Google Doc in there, and you as a teacher now can walk around digitally, walk around every paper and see how the kids are doing and typing. Then on top of that, they actually added in the fact that it tracks every single edit inside the document. Teachers are like, "Oh, now I can catch them and see if they're cheating." I'm like, "Yes, but you can also see their thinking process and why they shifted their thoughts right in the middle of that document as you track through and see how they're typing, and then to delete a whole paragraph, add a whole paragraph, or just change the whole document altogether. Now you can start to see how this child is acquiring or working through their problem solving. And with that, there's a data, I guess, analysis that's going on that people don't that a teacher's doing that maybe a computer could also do as well, but at some point with AI. But right now, a teacher can see that information. They're gathering all this data on an individual that they may not have ever been able to do, because all you get is the final paper. You get the final paper and you say, yeah, you did it or you didn't do it. Have a nice day. Now you can see the whole entire process and help the child out. And you don't have to do it for every kid. You can do it just with the ones that are struggling as well from your data. Sorry, I got excited.
I love it.